you don't have to learn everything the hard way. Okay, and that's not as easy as it sounds. The sounding boards and the mentors and those of wisdom that you truly trust them. Doesn't mean they're always right. Doesn't mean you're always going to listen. But you don't have to figure it all out on yourself. And a lot of people, listening is an art that is unfortunately more and more scarce. But people that close to you, they will listen. That would be one for sure. One for sure. And second is a little what we talked about earlier. One other would be rather look for those you love and care for and you're around that are in trouble, and just get at it. Get at it. If friends don't stab friends in the back, they stab them in the front. They stab them in the front. You come at people if you know they're in trouble. Tell them. You come right out and just, there's a problem. And, it could, look, let's face it, how many different education, social habits, untreated medical problems, terrible life habits, drinking, drugs, on and on, nefarious business, that's going on. If you care about them, get in their face and tell them. They can take it or leave it, but again, that's like stabbing people in the front. Right. It is. That's just a phrase. I didn't come up with it.
So what experience led you to learn the first lesson of not having to learn things the hard way?
I think actually in medicine you learn that. I think I could have learned that. I'm seeing something that I became more comfortable asking colleagues for their thoughts and advice as the further I went. And part of it is you're more comfortable saying you don't know. I mean, the last thing you want to do when you're a resident in visiting residency, you tell a patient you don't know. Well, I would gladly tell somebody. I said I don't know what it is. I'm going to find out, but I don't know. And so if I think earlier on, if I just went after colleagues more for their gems, and they may be colleagues younger than me. And that's another thing. I'd love talking to a colleague who's been in practice for a couple of years. Hey, you got an idea? I'm kind of at a loss. What do you think? You've been working with. Quote, professionally, I've just learned that. Just ask people. They want to talk about it. Docs love talking about medicine. Vast majority of people.
Good docs.
No, I think most do. Even people that are, maybe a bit more taciturn and don't get into conversations as often.
All right, go ahead.
You know too.
I know. Go ahead.
Oh my God. He was worrying about forgetting what he was going to ask.
This is what the notebook's for. I wrote it down. I found it.
You and I have excuses. We can do that.
I know. Okay. So, you're having a bad day.
Yes.
I could hear the gears turning there until it came. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
You're upset.
Mm-hmm.
You're even borderline angry. Where do you go to get perspective?
I know this is going to really sound weird. I'm not kidding, often gotten past that by a day of work. I know that's not the answer it's just, I say that by way of...
No, I'm going to make a comment when you're done. I'm not surprised.
I say that by way of, and again, I try to tell particularly residents this, look, dudette, I said, like, this is one of those things, you're on stage. You are. You're not an actor. There's no actresses anymore. We're all actors. But you are on stage. All that stuff goes away. You are top every time. Top. I don't care. They don't care if you haven't slept in a while, that your wife's mad at you, your boyfriend's mad at you. You are on stage. You're doing it better every day. And you don't do it every day if you're dragging that stuff into seeing a patient. So usually I find at the end of the day, I'm probably tired, but a lot of that kind of has gone away. I would like to say something like skiing, which I love to do, swimming, which I love to do. taking long hikes, which I mean, it's something like that. But I found that, and of course, you're seeing people they're far, far, far less fortunate than you are. That is that reality check that never gets old. I know it's not a standard answer, but that's really it.
It's a great answer.
Well,
It's your truth, so it's the best answer.
I don't believe in standards. I've given up believing in standards. Who knows? Who knows what we'd all be without standards? I can tell there's a thought coming.
In my life, when I made the switch from other people's opinions mattering more than my own, and I got to the point where my opinion mattered the most, which took quite a bit of deprogramming, because we're brought up to always please your parents, always be the best for your
teachers, right?
Always be the best altar boy or commentator, whatever it was, you had to be the best. And you relied on other people's evaluation of yourself rather than your own evaluation.
Approval. Yeah, that you're taught to get right. You get approval, scorecards, obviously report cards, on and on. You did a great job today. You did a great job. So you nailed that. Yeah, right. And it's others, sort of stamping, yes, you did a good job.
So, where or when did that happen in your life?
Well, so much of it. Well, okay, you know what? That is actually related to the charity work. If I can.
No, go ahead.
that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that is okay because this, the preamble of what we do, and we'll obviously talk about that some, but the preamble of it is that you're going to do, you're proceeding to take care of children with all of the same professionalism and capacity here in the United States to a distant part of the world. And that is a creed. That is a creed. This is not, I promise I'm getting to answer the question, but this is not, well, these kids have nothing and we can do this and it's a patchwork and we did something. No, that's not what it is. That invites a totally unacceptable level of danger. Okay. So, what do people think? To run the organization, now you've got a dozen directors. I am one. That if I am leading that group, which at the moment I am, and I have been for a while, but people have been there. You have to, what you have as your agenda, that is the agenda. We have agreed on this, and you don't get to hijack it. And I don't care what people think. They don't get to say, well, I don't like this or that. I said, fine, you stand in line. We have to get funding and staffing to go to India, and we don't have it. That's what we're doing today, and that's what we're going to do for the next couple of weeks. You don't get to jump ahead of that. And this is not, people really get put off by this. I'm a volunteer. This is taking me away from my family, my work, my income, my vacations, and you're telling me that I can say, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm telling you that because that's my responsibility. You're not, I said, I'm not making friends. I don't intend on making friends. You stand in line. You learn that as a kid too. Stand in line. I'm not sure that, but so I sort of learned it through doing that. It's just sort of, you have to be straight with people about this. And this is what we're doing. It's not a jumble. It's not a grab bag. This is our priority. Priorities, A, B, C, D, whatever.
That theme seems to run through your whole life, being straight with people.
You just do the best, like you learn that. You just do the best you can. And if I've learned that, it's probably the hard way too. But
it's very difficult for a lot of people to be straight with people.
It gets easier if you're in medicine. I mean, you just are left with that, and you learn to do it. You have to. You have to.
For those just joining us, we're with Dr. Dennis Snyder. This is Michael Robert Live. Thank you for tuning in tonight. I'm Julius. Who are you again?
This week, I think I'm Michael Robert.
And Dennis is one of the co-founders of Medical Missions for Children, and he is also a surgeon and has been practicing for over 38 years and recently retired in January. We're honored to have you here. Thank you. He's the author of 3 books. One was just released today.
Actually, just in print today. That is correct by total coincidence, but yes.
Is it available on Amazon?
It's available. It will be an electronic version soon enough, I hope, like that soon, but at Barnes & Noble, it is available. It is available because they've told me it is. Yes.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, that's really awesome. We've been talking for a little while now, so that's what the conversation was that you heard earlier. But we're going to touch on MMFC big time now. So let's go back to the beginning of that. Every young person, or most young people, will go into law, medicine, business or something with the idea of I'm going to change the world. And the percentage that don't get corrupted and that actually do that is very small. And from the work that I've seen that you do, you seem to be among the group of people who's actually taken your profession and really changed the world in a big way. So first of all, thank you. But what would you say to people, young people, who have that same ambition to go out and change the world?
Well, the part of that for sure. Thank you for the chance to be here. I'm honored to be here and have introduce perhaps an audience to this part of medicine and this part of a career. But that you're talking about a couple hundred people. It is not me. I'm one of a couple hundred people. Several of us started this in 1991. So the first thing would be is you don't do this alone. That would be your vision may change what you're doing, but you're not doing this alone. There are. I could stay here till bacon and eggs are served about all the people that have put in so much volunteer time and so much of their time, treasure, and talent to make this happen. And that's what so ally people to you. You can be a lead from the front. Show people that how committed you are. And you have to do that when you travel to any of the countries we go to. These folks don't know who you are. You have to really prove to them that you mean business. That you mean what you mean business. We are here to care for children who had nothing or no chance to be treated for a horrible deformity or affliction. I can go into some detail with that too. I know I sent some photos to Julius just to familiarize.
No, go ahead. You can keep talking. Yeah.
So
he's showing the photos.
I'm just showing them. Sorry, that's why I'm.
Please. No. Again, our care is centered around children born with severe congenital deformities, and the kids that you're looking at, and you may see some are not children, people that have citizens of usually a far off land, a very poor country that have never had a chance to have no access to medical care whatsoever, surgical care, to treat a cleft of the lip, a cleft of the palate, injuries. We also take care of children with burn injuries, children with and young adults that have very large neck masses of different sorts. Generally speaking, as frightening as that looks, these are almost always benign, but it is to think that someone can live a normal life like that is unthinkable. It just doesn't make sense. And lastly, we have dental teams that go with us everywhere, and that's these children and young adults have little, if any, access to dental care. And that's huge for someone's overall health.
What causes a cleft?
Well, this is it's inherited, so it's a genetic.
Oh, it's genetic.
It's genetic. And there are environmental pieces. There's always some controversy as far as the mother-to-be taking any number of different medications, poor prenatal care, poor prenatal care, alcohol use. We can go on and on about that. It's well worth discussing, but really this it's a collection of genetic elements that run in families, and it's a common malformation. So it is in plain English, the pieces of the genetic code and programming that bring the facial structures together. It didn't happen. Not all of the kids are otherwise healthy, but most are. Most are otherwise healthy children. There are, again, many that aren't, but most are, and that is an advantage in caring for them in a distant land.
Do you also physically you rebuild them and
Yes.
get them back to normal?
Yes.
What about the bullying and psychological abuse and you're a freak and all that stuff? Do you guys, is that part of the team?
That is a great question because the yes or no answer is no. There are so many pieces of overall care of the children that Julius has shown that we're with time, 30 plus years and counting, taking care of more and more of the needs of the children, be it a reconstructive surgery of the nose. Yes, that's more surgery. A more advanced dental care to assure that the adult teeth come through correctly. On and on. At orthodontia even. That's a huge part of treating these kids down the line, at an older age. But the psychic trauma, the internet, and bullying and complete ostracization of the kids, we have no, and that is a huge piece of caring. But it's just the kids we take care of. I mean, so many live at a tremendous distance from where we work. I mean, and I could see some of the children you show, they travel 2 or 3 days to get to see you. And to think that you can actually have a social worker get there and affect that when even the language barrier would make it impossible.
So are there local people that you work with? Do you bring translators? How does that part work?
The folks on the ground are absolutely a top of the list critical. You have to have a small group of people there that are as committed as you. And we have been so immensely blessed that in so many places that we've have those folks, because this goes on all year. They're getting messages, seeing families, planning this, taking care of problems, nutrition, on and on. And so you have to have the folks on the ground, and translators usually students are invaluable. So we do almost always get translators.
And can I jump in with a question? I'm sorry. This is, Gail, if I could trouble you to cut to 6. This is Jean-Paul.
Yes.
I know nothing about him. All I know is I like his sunglasses in the picture I'll show in a minute. But can you tell us his story?
Sure. I don't know if do you have a prior to surgery photo?
Yes, that's what I had up.
Can I take a look?
Of course.
I want to make sure it's
This is him, right?
That's him. You got it. Okay. John Paul, yes, please.
Can you just hold that thought?
Of course.
Because we won't forget it because we have the picture.
No, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
What life experience brought you to start this charity and do the work that you do? Your own life experience.
When I was in college, I had the chance to do a short term, mini term, whatever you want to call it, 5 to 6 weeks in Ecuador. This was biomedical, if you will, to some degree, anthropologic to some degree, but this was in Ecuador, and I wasn't a total, babe in the woods. I knew there was, quote, poverty, the fight on poverty, the war against, on and on. That was going on. But until you're there as one of these impossibly lucky Americans, and in a city like Guayaquil, Ecuador, which is a very impoverished country, a city in an impoverished country, and a beautiful country with beautiful people, and I mean that. But there's in every way. But the kids are on the street. They have
Nothing.
They have nothing. That just says it. And so it was more than just what used to be called culture shock. Yeah, you heard of it. I mean, and it was a corny term to begin with, but it does tell you something though. And so I already wanted to be in medicine, and it just sort of something that was always there in the front of my mind. There's got to be a way to apply what you become to such a place. And then oddly enough, we started going to Ecuador in the early 90s, 90 or 91, and from there it is expanded to just again, everybody's a volunteer. Every anesthesiologist, nurse, dentist, and surgeon, everybody's a
Amazing.
volunteer. Everyone.
Amazing.
People pay their way. They pay their way to go. So let's take nurses for instance, if I may. Okay, you might find nurses have 4 or 5 weeks vacation. So we'll say it's 4. You get to there before too long. A lot of nurses will go with us 3 weeks a year. So they've basically given us the vacations, and they pay to go, and they help us raise funds, and they work and work and work and are completely dedicated. Women and men, nurses, physicians, the same. And so everybody's a volunteer, and we've been able to now expand to having over 20 such trips, missions per year in 10 or 11 different countries. If you want to, I can go back to
Well, can I
John Paul,
jump in
but-
with a different question?
Of course.
You said the nurses.
Yes.
Is there one nurse in particular who you can think of who their story?
A nurse. There are many. Can I give you 2 answers?
Of course.
Okay, I could give you 200, but I want to give you one, and I can name them. I hope I can tell you their names.
Sure.
Sure.
Claire Donahue. Claire Donahue is a force. She's also a RN. She lives in New England. She could send a man to the moon. She could send. I mean, I say that by way of she could put together the technical pieces of going anywhere in the world almost single-handedly. It's frightening to see, and she works there with glee, almost manically. And we don't work. By the way, we work 8 to 10 hour days. You don't work people these 18-hour days. That doesn't happen. That is very dangerous. So you go somewhere. Let's say you're in Peru or Tanzania or whatever. You work usually 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Sometimes a bit later, but none of this 18-hour whatever nonsense. It's dangerous. But she does that, and what she did, it's just a force. She's a force. I mean, to see this, and a second individual I would like to recognize, the late Tracy O'Keefe-Rampani. She and her
From where?
From New York. She was from New York. She and her sister Shannon went with us all over the world for years. I mean, they gave us all of their time, and just the care they took of the children is just, it's just not exceptional. It's just absolutely celestial almost. I don't have to say it. They just love these kids and such care of them. And I put a dedication to Tracy in the book I wrote. She passed away suddenly.
Sorry to hear that.
And so I haven't actually had a chance to even call her family about, that I would like to send them a copy of the book. And she was 37, a new mom.
Oh my God.
New mom, and died suddenly but peacefully. And the prayers of all of our charity to her and her family. The service for her was just one of the most amazing. I see the strength amongst family members. It was amazing in every way. So, you could it on and on. I mean it. It's just the people that just give so much of themselves, and you can't you can't miss it. I mean, it's just there day and night, and again and again and again. It's not a novelty. That's once, twice. Okay, fine. This is time and time again.
That's amazing.
That's what they do. We had nothing without all of these folks.
So when you ask me, where do I see God? And I'm just kidding. I'm going to tell you. Whenever I see an unsolicited kindness is where I see God. And these people you described have lived their whole life
They have.
in unsolicited kindness to people.
They have. That's what they do, and they do it with absolutely unrestrained joy, and we're staying in safe places with good food. If you don't, you're putting people at undue danger or bad food. 2 people get sick, no one can work.
Right.
So but what it isn't is a vacation. It is not a vacation.
No, I don't.
It's not an adventure. It is, I guess, the first time or second time you go somewhere. This is sort of that stuff in your head, but it isn't. And my admiration.
But it's such good work.
Well, they're doing it. I mean,
So, Gail, if you cut to 6 again, this is John Paul post-op in his purple sunglasses.
yes.
And I loved this picture. So what's his story?
John Paul is a Rwandan child that we first saw. The exact year, I believe it was 2008 or 9, and he was 8 years old at the time. And he was born with a particularly rare, as I mentioned, cleft deformities are not rare. They are not, but what he has is rare. The term is called a Tessier bilateral 7 deformity. In plain English, if you stand in front of a mirror, okay, if you stand in front, yeah, right, I'll really do this well. Stand in front of a mirror and just smile and do this with your 2 index fingers. Where my fingers are, yeah, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. There's no tissue. There's no skin. There's no muscle. There's no saliva gland pathway. There's no internal lining, mucus lining. There's nothing. It was never developed. It is if a sharp instrument cut somebody through like this. And he was born, of course, with that. This is congenital. And he also, if you see on the other picture, he has a very large lump on one side. This is not common either, but with somebody with such a severe deformity, it's called a duplication. In plain English, all of the genetic signals that bring your face, all part of your body together, every organ together. Part of that signal is it builds extra bone, and so that has to be removed, and all the pieces put back together. And so he is absolutely, I did write quite a bit about him because he's just such an exceptional, he came back to see us repeatedly. He's doing great. He's a very bright now man. I wanted to get a picture with the glasses on, but the Steri-Strip butterfly bandages off. He didn't have much enthusiasm about anybody touching him anymore, so we just took pictures as is. He really did beautifully. I'm glad to say, thank God, he did very well.
So
Can he speak and eat and
And there's a lot of pieces there as well. He can eat and drink and swallow without any problem. His speech is very compromised. It is very compromised. Simply because by the time we saw him, he was 8 years old. And this is just a grim reality. At that age, if you're seeing a child for the first time, you will never get their speech anything close to right. You can improve it, particularly with speech therapy. Again, it's just not practical. He lives a long ways from the hospital. It's just not practical. Yes, it's a gap. This is the thing. You can always do better. That's where people should be looking. You can always do more. You can always do better. And that is a significant gap in his care.
what's his family's story?
He came in with his mom and one other relative. The fact of the matter is many of the kids are orphaned. It's just not many come in with their fathers. They come in with their moms. Their grandmothers are very commonly, they come in with their grandparents, aunt, uncle, a priest, a nun, a neighbor, or in some cases alone. I mean, children won't, but some of the older kids, teens, they'll just show up.
And you personally, how many missions have you done?
About 170.
Wow. And the organization has done
Close to 500.
And served.
You know, it's the dental team. We parse that out a bit, but certainly we've cared for 80 to 100,000 kids, and the dental team on top of that. They are conservative numbers.
So how many surgeries would Jean-Paul have had to get him to look the way he looks?
One. Took 2 hours and 20 minutes. One operation.
That is amazing.
One operation.
Wow.
Let's take a look at one other case. I don't know this kid's name. I wonder if you. Oh, actually, I do. Never mind. His name's Tobias.
Tobias, we saw, he's Tanzanian. We saw him for the first time in 2009 or 2010. He lives on the most western part of Tanzania, a very dry, very arid area, and we were on the East Coast in Dar es Salaam. That's where we had our hospital volunteer team set up, and his mother, this is John Paul, was the youngest of her 4 children, and her just physically getting to the hospital, it took the physical piece took 2.5 days. She would take like these small cramped vans that go at most 20, 25 miles an hour, and occasionally a bus to here and to here and to here. But we learned when she was there is that she had to save up for a couple months to get the money to do that, because she saw a posting in the town center. That's a lot of times in Rwanda and Tanzania and Madagascar. There's postings just at a town center, like on a tree or a fence. You know, it's like, you know, you need a ride somewhere, tear off a sheet. That used to be done in college. It's not so much anymore. You see them. So there was a posting. So she got the shillings, the Tanzanian shillings, to get to Dar es Salaam. It took her a couple months. It was a little over $5 to travel 600 or 700 miles by these rickety old buses. So we did find a better way to get her home. But this was a radiant young woman. And in Tanzania, the Tobias' mom, he was 11 months old, otherwise remarkably healthy child. And once we found a translator, because she spoke a really distant language, there's over 100 tribal languages in Tanzania.
A dialect?
No, it's actually just a completely different language.
Different language.
You know, it just Swahili is a structured, formalized language for trade, and of course became the standard of language in a number of countries, and that's a great service to the populace. But most distant residents don't even recognize it as a way to communicate. But I'll mention her. Tobias, of course, is what this is about in a minute. But her story, once we had a translator about, his story when he was born. And of course, he was born at home like her other children, and of course, he's born with this truly horrific deformity, and of course, they had no understanding of what this was. And we asked, "What did you do?" And it just said, "How did you care?" He said, "Nobody." She was alone with her kids. Said we stayed with him all the time. We never left except someone to get food, and we were just waiting for him to die. We just were waiting for him to die. We didn't think he'd ever live. But he did. He was able to take enough nourishment. I know that sounds difficult, if not impossible, but what he has is, again, a very rare and a very severe deformity. This is called a Tessier 3 bilateral. What it means is, again, if you pardon me, but if you do this at a mirror, take your index and middle finger of one hand and do this. Okay, where your fingers are, my fingers are, there's nothing there. There's nothing. There's no skin, there's no muscle, there's no bone. There's no mucus lining. There's no palate. There's nothing. And that's Tobias. And do you have a post-op of him?
I do.
Yeah,
That's the most incredible thing.
That's him afterwards. That was a couple days later. I think
gonna
it's only
zoom
a
in a
couple
little
days
bit
later.
on
I
this
think it
one.
is.
I think it's much
There's one a year later. I think that's right after. I believe that's him, and that's of course his mom. Yeah, he did beautifully. I mean, and again, he's healthy otherwise, and he was a robust baby. again, he was able to take sustenance with that deformity. Um, it's to hope we see him again someday. It'd be very unlikely. They live in a very, very distant part of the country, in a really remote area. And of course, you get that from other people. His mom has no concept of a map, or geography or West. I mean, but this is a absolutely beautiful woman, and to hear her tell the story of the kids just took care of him and said, well, he may not be here tomorrow, but we have him today, and we love him.
Is gene therapy something that could fix this, like CRISPR?
Wow. Wouldn't that be something? Someday to recognize and to have it in the right hands and to have it in this part of the world. Possible. Absolutely. How and when and the mechanics of it. And this is the biggest problem there is that this is multiple genetic pieces, parts of the genetic code. This is a lot of genes. You're not talking about.
It's not one thing.
One thing, like red hair, blue eyes, onward, whatnot. It isn't.
My understanding is very.
You asked a hell of a good question, because this is, of course, could it be repaired in utero? It just isn't possible. A very more than a valid question. Have a child born looking a heck of a lot more normal. Is it genetic therapy? This is to such a distant area, probably borders on Star Wars, Star Trek. Excuse me, sorry, Star Trek. Doc. Bones. That was
McCoy.
Bones.
Bones.
McCoy.
McCoy.
Yeah, McCoy. Yeah. Sorry. So anyway, and
This is Cahill.
Cahill. Yeah, Cahill's in the Philippines. Take one quick look. I do know the man. Yeah, and this is a child that is a completely different problem.
I don't know if we have a post-op. Go ahead, It doesn't look like he has a right nostril.
Right, correct. And so the concern here is this again. This is the signals to bring the facial pieces together. Now we're accompanied by a primary developmental problem with the nose developing. Any child, and I'll promise I'll be brief, but any child with a cleft deformity has a deformed nose. It's a secondary. The problem with this beautiful little kid is that he has a severe deformity of the nose, and it's a midline piece of the body. Yeah, you might want to show him. And when that occurs, he could have a defect in his skull, at the base of the skull to the brain. And so he has to go to Manila and get X-rays that we will pay for, and to make sure there's not a defect of his frontal part or the forward part of the brain, what you would do then is you'd wait till he was older and do what you could under a local anesthetic.
I want to touch on these photos that are of their living environment.
Yes.
Where is this?
Yeah, that's in Manila. This is
Philippines.
This is in the Philippines, the capital of the Philippines, in Manila. Let me start one more time, just so you know. This one slum, that is more. There are more residents, Filipino residents of this slum, than there are residents of inner city Boston. That's how big that is. That's where our patients live. They're the ones that live in a municipality. It's horrible. There are hundreds of thousands of Filipino residents living in that area. This is Slimanche is a city-size dump, landfill dump.
It's all our garbage.
Yeah, it's all our garbage, and that's all the garbage of Cambodia. It's in Phnom Penh. These children basically live there. They're looking for anything, scraps of metal, coins, bits of food, and one of the bigger items they look for to sell are hypodermic needles. Yeah, that's where they live.
Drug use.
And by the way, an almost huge shout out to the Cambodian Children's Fund. Unbelievable organization. We have been partnering with them. Unbelievable what they've done for these children. That's where they live. You're looking at it. That is in the western part. It's a refugee camp in the western part of Tanzania. Tobias was not from there, but that's a refugee camp on the border of Tanzania and Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo. Last is that's a shanty town in Guatemala City. Guatemala City is the most dangerous city in the Western Hemisphere, by the way. Probably. We do not have a team that's it's just too dangerous, but we do have groups that go some distance away where it is safer, notably safer, so where you can stay together and work together and with no undue danger. So it's a very dangerous place. That Guatemala City. That's where our patients live.
Let's touch on, is this a his or her?
That's his name. Louis. That's Louis. L-U-I-S. Louis. He is that's a believe it or not, a fairly common deformity. It's a bilateral cleft of the lip and palate. So this is 2 operations. This is after the first operation where the lip and mouth and nose are brought together. That's the day after. That's the day after surgery. The picture on the side, and all of the caretakers I mentioned earlier, Shannon, Tracy, God rest her soul, Claire, all were taking care of. What am I talking about? They were for all these folks, all these kids, and many others. But I will name them in particular. That operation takes a little over an hour to do.
This is an adult.
It's Marguerite.
First adult,
yeah.
Marguerite.
Yeah, and she. This is something that when we talk to potential donors or people that have been donors, that we have an organization, Medical Missions for Children. Some of the patients we see are, quite honestly, they're older than me. They're certainly in their 30s and 40s, and I was younger, and they're even in their 50s and 60s. She was 48, and she's lived that every day of her life.
Oh. Where was she from?
I'm sorry, she's from...
Marguerite. Where is Marguerite?
Marguerite is from Leyte. It's Philippines. She's from the Philippines. So it was in Tacloban in the Philippines.
How did she end up at your clinic?
Actually, the churches are a tremendous source. Announcements at churches by priests, bishops, and of course of physical posting have been a huge. And of course now, even in poverty-stricken areas, there's internet. Someone has a phone, but we still rely on word of mouth, physical postings. And in the Philippines, is there a post-op picture of? There is somewhere, I know.
There is somewhere. I will find it.
Marguerite.
Yeah, I thought it was in here. I'll find it. It's somewhere.
It's down the line a ways.
Yes.
Does she have blue eyes?
Ooh, I don't think it's possible. She has light eyes. I think that would have been. It's certainly she could have a.
Is that common?
Parentage. It could be parentage. My guess, or it could be.
Here we go.
Yeah, there she is. Is that post-op?
There it is.
Yeah, there she is. I wanted her to smile a little more, but it just didn't happen. That was the next day, and she was left better than she started. Again, there are pieces of her life that you can't get back. But
so, have you ever encountered the cultures that think these people are demonic or
yes,
evil spirits?
yes, that's
Yeah,
rife.
thought
That's
about that.
rampant. I did again. I know this is a shameless plug, but I put significant amount of that in the We Never Knew of Darkness, which is a story of Rwanda. It's not just Rwanda; it's everywhere. You're being punished. The parents are being punished. You have done evil.
Right.
You were a genocidaire, meaning you were a progenitor of the genocide in Rwanda, and this is how you're punished. In Philippines, it's the same. Again, it's a very a Catholic country, but there's beliefs. Even you're being punished, and certainly more traditional local beliefs of different communities that this is a punishment. And yes, absolutely. That's one of the reasons there'll be shut-ins. They won't. People will. The family denies existence.
Right.
they would report the equivalent of a miscarriage, whatever word is used in the colloquial local of that. That we have that child died, and well, he or she didn't. And it's just, again, and with COVID, we couldn't send teams anywhere. So the prevalence is just increased because there's more and more kids that have not had any access simply because there's nobody to take care of them.
I'm trying to find the first page of your book. That's what I'm doing, but go ahead.
Do you track any of that? Like, I don't know, somehow I would hope that the number of cases would be on the decline. But from what you're saying, they're on the incline.
Since we've been speaking here tonight, since we started, 60 more children have been born somewhere in the world with this deformity. Now, of those 60, 55 to 57 have been born somewhere that can't take care of them. That's a fact. Just do the math. It adds up. It adds up in a hurry. It's that bad. And so if you could, one wish, snap your fingers on 10 more organizations. There are many organizations that do tremendous work. If there were 10 more of each of them, you'd all be busy. You'd all be busy.
So the typical cost to the charity to do one of these is?
Well, to go to, on average, to go somewhere for a length of time, let's say 10 days. Some are a little more, some are significantly more. Some are a little less and some significantly more. I mean, you can enumerate all of the costs, but certainly $50,000 to $60,000 is what it takes. I can run through what is involved, break that down. But I can tell you that in that time, for that amount of American green, you can take care of 50 to 100 children. You can't come close to taking care of one child in the United States.
Right.
So just some perspective on the economics of this. It's just math. It's just a cold fact.
How did you find out about this problem?
Well,
Ecuador?
In Ecuador.
Is it in Ecuador?
Well,
Okay.
in Ecuador Ecuador and Peru and parts of Central America have a very, very high incidence.
That's interesting.
There's a lot of pieces of that. It's certainly, there's a very restricted genetic pool.
Ah.
I mean, you think wealth keeps people close. You see what poverty does.
Right.
And think of how many people in the world never have and never will travel more than 10 miles from where they were born. So you've got a very restricted genetic pool. And that's
You mean other than in Rhode Island?
I wasn't going to start in with Rhode Island. I mean, jokes. Okay. If we want to get to that, well,
You can't.
It could.
You're a New Yorker in Massachusetts. Only a Rhode Islander can say that.
That's true.
I'm kidding.
Well, you get into it pretty good earlier.
The work you all do is really incredible. It's really incredible.
You get back more than you give. You talk to anybody that's done this for any length of time, they will tell you that. That I tell you, you get back more than you give.
If you'd like to be a part of supporting this cause, there's a link in the description of this YouTube video. It's right at the top. Just click it, and please consider using it. It's 93% of everything goes directly to the missions.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Well, I find it miraculous.
You can always do better. You can always do more. And if you can do it safely, you would not typify any of the sites we go to as safe. This is safe. My backyard's safe. There's a measured risk, but you for your team members, and God knows for the patients and their family, no exceptional or non-measurable risk. That's something that's a coup in the air. There is an airport closed. There's a volcano. There's an earthquake. There's a flood. On and on. Typhoon. I mean, you can do more if you can do it safely. And there's volunteers. There's people that just can't wait to be part of it. I'm telling you, they volunteers. They want to be part of this.
How often have you had to pack up in a hurry?
You know, a couple times.
Oh, that's good.
A couple times. I mean, you
Well,
can
only a couple times, right?
only
Yeah.
a couple times you can dramatize that to say, it was a storm coming. Get the work done, get people home, and get on an earlier flight. That was in the Philippines, and it was a horrific typhoon about 10 years ago. So it does happen. It does. It happened in Ecuador. There was a coup that closed the streets and airport. Fortunately, it was reversed, if you will, or at least quelled within 2 days with no harm to any of the team or our kids. It can happen. Any of the above.
So, has this work made you more spiritual or affected your relationship with God? I have no idea where that question just came from, but let's go with it.
The kids we see and the people we work with have, yes. I can't. Why this happens, I don't know. I can tell you scientifically why, but why? Why? I have no idea, because it didn't happen to this family or this one, but it did to them. I have no idea.
It's 1 in 1,000.
Well, it depends on the population. That's a pretty good number if you look across much of the world. In Andean population, through Colombia, through parts of Peru and Bolivia, and even into Chile, it's probably 1 in 100 in places. And oddly enough, in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, it's 1 in 2,500. The problem is there is nobody in Africa to take care of the kids. There are countries the size of all of New England that don't have one physician to care for these kids. Not one. That's a fact. And so that it doesn't matter. I mean, the incidence is low compared to even the United States. The United States is largely like 1 in 700.
Is the incidence greater in indigenous people?
Definitely.
Any thoughts?
Well, again, it's just there's so many factors as far as there's no genetic the genetic mixing isn't there.
Oh, that's right. You were saying.
Well, and also, because the plain and simple fact is consanguineous marriages.
Right.
What little you have is not going to a strange family. Cousins all the time are married, half brothers and sisters. That will only amplify this. I know.
We're going to run a little over, but there are a few things I want to do last. The organization does some work in Ukraine.
Yes.
This is one of those children. His name's Mykola Priya.
Mykola, yes.
He's a
that's
burn
Mykola.
victim.
Yes.
What's his story?
And he was and I think as a preamble, we started going to Ukraine. We've had 25 or 30 trips to Ukraine between 1996, I believe, 97, and of course before COVID. And now there is a hot war, if ever in my life there has been, is there. So we cannot send teams there now. We're able to send supplies now, and they do get there safely through Poland. But Mykola, he and his brother were playing soccer, and there was a downed wire, and 2 children were killed, but he and his brother survived. The 2 children were killed. They certainly died instantly. That once, if there's pathways through your heart will stop and you will die. Live virtually instantly. But this basically, if you will, arced or spread through their skull, and it burnt off his. This is a down power wire, and it burned his skull off. Now, he's alive. He doesn't have facial burns, and he did not have, by the way, a brain injury.
That's incredible.
Well, he didn't, but he had.
Here's post-op.
And now, again, this skips a lot of steps, but this is treated by using expanders. So it is a very labor-intensive and time-intensive process where you put an implant under the skin, deep under the skin, and expand the skin. And then you ally that or bring that skin into part of the defect. And then you do it again and again and again until it's covered. Think of a expecting mother. That's this human body the skin can expand a lot. And the advantage is it's against bone. And being against bone, there's a hard surface so you can expand it. It looks very strange.
Yeah, I have a
It looks very, very strange when it's in progress, and you have to keep, obviously, kids. That's a beautiful young girl.
Leslia.
And that's what you're looking at is an expander. It's a silicone implant that you inject saline in slowly. It's done painlessly. Really, it's done very slowly. It takes months. And kids either stay home or they wear a hat, but you can imagine that.
I don't think you could wear a hat over
there. You're going to have trouble putting a hat over that. So, and she did, obviously, it's great to see.
Here's your post-op.
Now, you'll notice on the right side she has a deep second-degree burn on the right side of her face. She's an absolutely gorgeous child. If she wasn't a gorgeous child, this would be the same statement, but remember the family seeing their beautiful daughter. So the skin, she now has a scalp, and basically she will drape her hair over that.
What happened to her? Why did this?
She had a thermal burn. She had a boiling water on her head, and that was an assault.
An assault?
An assault. Her drunken father did it to her.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. It's horrible, but she has, that was an assault. It could have killed her, and if it was over her face, mercifully, it only was a small part, and it can be disguised. And so you do take that, and let's face it, it's even more devastating to young girls. You probably won't touch that, but there are things you can do later on if it becomes more evident. But for the time being, you don't.
And so what happened to the first? What happened to Mykola?
Mykola had that was the same process after a electrical burn. So there's an electrical burn across the scalp, and it just charred his scalp, half of it. And so by using these expanders, you say grow, but you swell out normal skin. You cut out the affected skin, and you bring that piece in. And you do it again. It goes on for a couple of years, and you have to have the sign-in of the. But let's face it, he wants to get better. His family wants to get better. You will never see these scars. Why? They're covered hair. Yes, if he's bald someday.
Does he live a normal life now?
He's in Ukraine, so there's probably nobody living a normal life, but absolutely. He can go to school and have girlfriends, guy friends, he can have a normal life. Yes, he can.
And Lesia. I'm probably butchering these names, but what happened to her?
Well, this is a young child that she had. This was a thermal burn from an assault with boiling water, and that is not rare. That is not a rare. It's horrific, but it was.
Were there a lot of kids that came in with that?
A lot of kids with terrible. This is a burn center, by the way, in Ukraine, in the western part of Ukraine. So yes, every day there were.
With boiling water incidents?
No, not necessarily. And some are accidents. I mean, remember, mother, there's nobody helping her, 3 or 4 kids running around, hot stove, open fires that we would never think of a danger, open fires, and, of course, house fires. Now, there's no building codes. No. I mean, none. You can imagine the injuries that are, it's heartbreaking to see it's heartbreaking what's going on in the country. I have so many close Ukrainian friends, and I don't know how they're even getting through the day.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
It's just, that speaks the obvious.
We need to stop that.
Understood.
It's already hard enough over there. But as a tradition on this show, the previous guest always leaves the upcoming guest a question, not knowing anything about who the next guest is going to be.
Okay.
This is, can you, to my ability, that says 3 words that are important to you.
There it is. Oh, I write it in. Okay.
Oh, you can answer it
I can
already.
answer them exactly. Yeah, it's a stalling tactic. Of course it is. Giving, caring, giving, and faith. And I don't think you can overstate any of them. I'll write them in. I got this beautiful pen. That's in no intentional order, by the way. I don't think there are too many bad answers. Helps, and no one put in Ferrari as an answer.
No, thankfully not. Thank you. I'm going to be giving this back to you in a minute. But the last question that we always end with, and Julia's going to kill me. I want to say a big thank you to Julia, who's a mutual friend of ours who helped put this together. Thank you so much.
And who
Julia.
helps the charity so much.
Yes.
You talk about a force. Julia, God love you. We all do.
The last question.
Yes.
What advice or stories would you pass forward to your great-grandchild if they stumbled across this many years from now? And maybe, not to be morbid, but, maybe we're not here anymore.
That's a fact, speaking personally.
Except for my mother-in-law. She said she's going to live until she's 120.
Whoa. 120? That's kind of a long... Remember retiring? I only got 60 years left. Find ways to give and never stop giving. There's nothing like it in the world. What you get back is, again, more than you give. And you'll find it. Because you can find it if you want to. That's, I think, it'd be it.
Dennis, thank you very much for joining us here tonight. This has been such an incredible episode and story and all of it. It's hard to put words to it. That's why I'm sitting here in silence, staring at my cup.
Fine lady and gentlemen,
Yes.
the pleasure and honor has been mine. I obviously, to talk about our charity and all the people involved means the world to me, and thank you.
You're an extraordinary human being doing extraordinary things.
The
We all thank you. And the
I
team.
work with that take care of our kids. This is to them. Believe me.
We'll have to talk about your book the next time you come back.
Yes, promise us you'll come back to talk about the books.
Be my pleasure.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you so
for you
much.
to touch on. Thank you all. I'd like to say thank you to Gail Diodati, our chief production manager, and Michael Paranunzi, our producer. There's no after show this evening. We'll be back with that tradition next episode. Have a great night, everyone. See you next week.
Good night, everyone.
Good night to one and all.